use that as an opportunity to bring that awareness of those questions out of the mind into the heart, making space in the mind for insight, making space in the mind for actually a place to process and sort of move the building blocks around a little bit around these ideas. Veronica's showing us a picture of a game that she hasn't seen in many, many years, but it's one of these plastic squares and it has the little numbers inside and you slide them around. Do you remember that game?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in that game, the reason it is a game is because there's one open space and you manipulate everything around that open space to create a new image. Well, part of taking your questions out of your mind and into the heart is like making more space, open spaces in that kind of a game. You allow yourself to have an opportunity to manipulate information with more space, more openness, access to more clarity, of course, but also access to more of the wholeness of you being present. More open space means more wholeness. It's like breaking up. When there's lots of questions, there's no room for whole bits of you, because the questions divide up the space very drastically. This is something that's more energetic than visual even, but we just see it so clearly how when you have all these questions, it's like, let's say, a bunch of trees in a field, or maybe weeds is a better one, a bunch of weeds in the field, and when you take some of the weeds out, there's more meadow, there's more open space, there's more room for expansion and expression. So we want to remind you of the tool of taking the information from your mind and bringing it into your heart and asking yourself the question, what does this really tell me about me? What does this really show me about me? What is this illuminating about me? Those things are actually more important than how do I solve this situation. It's not about I need an answer to this question as much as it's about what does this show me about me? Because situations aren't presenting themselves necessarily to be solved. Situations are presenting themselves like sandpaper to do the work of smoothing out the edges. And sometimes what happens is when you realize what you're learning about the situation, you actually don't even have to figure out or change the situation. It evolves itself on its own. We invite you to keep this concept in mind for yourself. Keep this concept alive for yourself so that you can do yourself the favor of making it easier for you to abide in places where there are questions, because there are always going to be questions. There's always going to be places within you that you don't know the answer, or you don't have the clarity of the path, or you're still working against the need for certainty. So as you abide in all of that, you give yourself permission to abide in it from a heart-centered place where you're opening to wholeness. And in that heart-centered place where you open to wholeness, you're going to give yourself the most opportunity to experience the truth of you. And really, when you experience the truth of you, that's the end result desired. There's not an outcome desired. It's not about fixing, changing, solving, transforming even, as much as it's about experiencing the wholeness of you. So we're inviting you to remember that to experience the wholeness of you is the outcome of every situation that has a question mark in it. Should I do this business opportunity? Should I follow this path? Should I date this person? Should I change this part of my life? Well, the desire for those questions to be answered has to be moved into what is this teaching about me? What am I learning about myself? And how is the wholeness of me expressed while in this questioning state? You're accustomed to getting answers and then feeling a sense of relief. What we would like to help you learn to do is find that sense of completeness within a question. Because there's always going to be more questions. You are in a questioning society, but more importantly, you're part of a soul that has the eternal question of, who am I? That the soul is seeking to explore and understand and express and live through an infinite variety of things. So when you're looking for who am I, You have to always acknowledge you live in a question. And this is something that we haven't really dealt with, but we've talked to you guys about where do you lie to yourself and what is true now. Well, another thing to keep in mind is I am abiding in a question. There's always going to be a question here. And the question is, who am I? Or how can I express my wholeness? Or how is this showing me my wholeness? And that is the highest level, let's say, of inquiry that you're really looking at right now. And every question can be taken back to that question. So as you explore every question, remind yourself that they really are all the same question. And that's going to help you experience your world in a way that will be surprising to you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Almost meditative, huh? Mm-hmm. Surprising every once in a while what they come up with. Abiding in a question. We had never sort of framed it that way before, but it's really true. You really are abiding in a permanent state of question, and your society and culture teach you that you should be in a state of certainty. And there you have duality. Again, another example. That's a very powerful example of duality we've never talked about before. How you are a question and you're living in a society that wants you to be in certainty. Interesting. We're getting a lot out of that. And this question doesn't have to be your permanent question. It can just be interesting to see your question of now. And it may have to do with that core thing we talked about last time. It'll be interesting to look at yourself as, what is the question I am answering by the current way I'm living? What is the question I'm exploring by my expression? It's just really similar to where you lined yourself, right? Where we wanted to have you look at you in a new way. So instead of where you lined yourself, or in addition to, it's, what is the question that I am exploring? What is the question I am exploring? We think you can learn quite a bit from that inquiry. And also from keeping it in mind as you go about your day. You know, something comes up and it feels kind of sandpapery, and you say, well, what is the question I'm exploring? We want you to become comfortable with being a question mark. Consciously knowing you are in a questioning state is something very important for you to get a grasp on. Because nothing is ever going to be certain again, because you've realized that certainty is a fallacy. So when you let go of certainty as a fallacy, you have to say, well, what am I in instead? And we've talked about how you're in clarity. Well, clarity is true, but you're also in the question of you as you anticipate clarity coming in, not to answer the question, but to give you the next step in the road of exploring the question that you are living. Clarity isn't a momentary sense of certainty. Maybe it has been a little bit. But the truth is, clarity is simply, oh, yes, that tells me the moment's answer to my question. But the question, who am I, does not go away simply because you have an aha about that this moment. It is, who am I? Aha. And who am I? And that's the path of consciousness. That's how you've walked consciously on this planet thus far, but it's another way of describing, or another tool in accessing the consciousness of the moment.